So the wealth of going through with and carrying out a process through a system that has not only become fundamentally you and a representation of who you are through fundamental principles, but goes back prior to your birth. The way you think, the animate aspects of your intrinsic self. And so this gets into a pleasure-pain principle of reward, but it also implicates how people fundamentally think and will think, the properties of what they will go back to. And this, this is like preternatural stuff. It gets into realms of esotericism that could only be seen as a like culmination of a jinn sort of energy. Some, from a very fundamentalist Christian standpoint, which never works, any sort of fallacy-based fundamentalism is always going to collapse on itself and destroy everything around it. And it is the machine, it's part of the machine, the culmination of the historical capitalistic quandary that we're all in right now, is a question that doesn't even really exist. And so fundamentally, coming back to pleasure and pain, a reward system that lets you off the hook through your ethics and your morality, where I have done enough. But if you get down to the base essence of who you are, and you're able to do that, whether or not the stage exists, whether or not there is, like you'd think the populist movement is based on population, popularity, pop culture. But what you really have is you've got a trickle-down effect. You have a really, an elitism going on where, the poor, the lower class are going to find out last. The lower class are going to, our taxation system is, so we live in a populist movement. We're not aware of it, or we are aware of it. What can we do about it? And this is the only thing that can be done. And if you practice the principles of the self, you are never going to feel like you let yourself down. And it really gets into existential rewards based on love. But when there was no one there, where did that fundamental reward system gain its money, its exchange? It wasn't an exchange value. It was an intrinsic knowing of worth and value, but no need to cross-compare yourself to any other standard or any other. There was no deviation implied. And in this side of things, this carbon-based corporeal place, not that that isn't when you are in utero or prior to, is really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, the prima materia prima, the first substance, that sort of murky place where nothing really exists, but it exists more profoundly because it is a thing, and it will become a thing, and it will solidify itself. And that's really what first principles are all about. And so fundamentally, are there people that are among us? And I can say unequivocally that yes, unequivocally, there are people who could be considered those that are constantly playing the trickster. If you look back at them in childhood, you know who they are. Those who are 100%, again, existentially based, where their motive force is constant competition. All they do is compete with other people. They're not necessarily, a lot of them aren't necessarily bad people, but they can't get away from it because it's their fundamental drive, and it becomes their psycho drive, right? So you can go down to the anima, the animus, the Jungian writings and philosophies, but if you go even deeper into the areas of fundamental principles, that you were essentially principle before you knew you were thought of yourself as a thing. And through those principles, you were both invaded upon and feeling a sort of connectivity to the all. And it gets into this conjecture of the monad, the perfect symbol, the perfect energy pathway, the perfect geometrical pattern, and how closely we can identify to that, or how we can represent that. And that is our true aim. That is our true goal, is to live by those first principles, that you're not ever going to get anywhere if you're working against yourself. Getting back fundamentally to the place where you know who you are and what you are, and then not buying into, unless that's what you were made as the seed that you were, to get into this competition that breeds jealousy and envy and animosity, and then potentially violence. In this culture, that's what will happen. Something that's seemingly benign will become extremely dangerous and volatile, based on the self-evaluation and self-reward system, from a lack of understanding of this binge purge, controlled, but not controlled to the point where you're going outside yourself. So you never like nete quae virius extra. You never seek yourself outside yourself. Know thyself, right? All these adages, philosophical adages, as well as transcendental philosophical, where you'll never find yourself out here. Out here will only lead to challenges that are based on, so whoever, whatever engineered this entire thing, it was probably us, but it was probably this mind of understanding. I think we re-solidified it, but something else actually created it, the construct, and then the construct met with the persona or personalities that would be manifest as a human being came into the existential. So those polemic, warlike, kakistocracy-based, meritocracy-based, populist movements were already in those jinn-type entities, and that philosophical truth of themselves is being displayed out here in fruition, in pathos, rhetoric, sway, and play, and is being solidified in a world of dead. It's really, everything is dead. It's all carbon-based, rotting, carbon 7, carbon 14, rotting substance that can be shaped into anything. And so geniuses are people who are regarded as those who can shape this carbon into something that's beneficial to them first, makes them rich, makes other people rich, so that they can have this advantage over those who don't think like this at all, who are of the pure source. It's a value system saying my intrinsic value has more worth than yours does. You may be at peace, you may be in purity, you may be in a homeostatic or thermodynamically in equilibrium place, but we are using entropy and chaos to gain wherever we are, and that's who we are. So it's a statement of superiority ultimately, and that's where all of the shaming and the gaslighting and the Stockholm syndrome, and then ultimately where demagoguery comes into play.